Good afternoon, good morning, good evening, wherever you are in the world. It is winter in South Africa, and boy, it is cold. I wonder if I started early. Live just come up there. Hello world. Hello, dear viewer. If I did start not on time, then. Right, we are honoured to have with us this evening the guys from uAvionix, guys that make ADS-B devices for unmanned aircraft, and of course we can see Bruce. We can see Chris Ballard, who's pretending he's not in a pub, Jean, who's disappeared off, and Jonathan, who's just staring off stage right as we go there. So let's start with Christian and Ryan from uAvionix. ADS-B, maybe you can lead us by the hand as to exactly what it is and why we might care about it in the unmanned aircraft world.
Okay, sure. Thanks for having us on, Gary. And I'm Christian Ramsey. This is Ryan Braun. We're both with uAvionix, and our company was really founded on the principle that ADS-B is going to be a key technology for beyond line of sight operations for UAVs, RPAS, UAS, drones, whatever you want to call them. ADS-B is an aviation technology that is an international standard and growing worldwide. There are several countries in the world today that have mandates in place in order for manned aviation aircraft to have ADS-B on board the aircraft if you're flying in certain defined airspaces, depending on which country you're in. And basically what it does is it's sort of an upgrade / replacement for your traditional radar, where the aircraft itself takes its own GPS position and then broadcasts that out for anyone who's listening to hear. So who's listening might be air traffic control, it might be another airplane, it might be a drone, it might just be someone that wants to put a ground station on the ground and watch airplanes. So you know, if you're, you can imagine that if you're a drone and there's a technology out there that would communicate your drone's position to a nearby airplane or a helicopter, then that might be useful for beyond line of sight safety purposes.
Absolutely. Now, I've put this up early, which I shouldn't have done, but let's not jump to that straight away. You seem to be, in fact, let's just stop presenting that now. Let's just stop presenting that. So you're going full range with what you're offering, and I believe if you come from the radio control model world, one of your founders was quite involved in one of the little bit of technologies that we all use. Am I right in thinking that your main man, well, basically bought us 2.4 gig control links?
Correct.
He did. Yeah. So Paul Beard is the CEO and founder of uAvionix, and in his prior life, he invented the spread spectrum radio technology that's used in Spectrum RC, which eventually was a Horizon Hobby product. Worldwide, everywhere we go, people see our devices and they say, "Oh, those look a lot like Spectrum radios," and there's a good reason for that. And that really changed and challenged people's assumptions on how radios could be used, what the form factors were like, and kind of the safety benefits that could come from things. And we've done something very similar with the ADS-B in that it was traditionally a manned aviation technology. It was very large. It wasn't something that anyone really thought of putting on drones because it was the technology that needed to be overcome or to be implemented to do that was very, very difficult. And Paul is a brilliant inventor and engineer, and really was able to sit back, iterate, go to the garage as it were, and work through these designs and find a way to miniaturize this technology. So a lot of folks in the RC industry and in the unmanned aircraft industry have used this products with the Spectrum RC, and we're hoping we can have a similar success story with this.
Yeah, absolutely. It's actually just come to my mind. Look how well prepared I am. Look, I've got a Spectrum receiver here, and not only that, I also have an autopilot that would be absolutely capable of taking one of your your ping receivers directly into it, and it would speak direct into a Pixel. See, I've nicely prepared this presentation here. No, it just happened to be on my desk, and I've also got I've got an ADS-B receiver because I'm also playing this ADS-B game, playing along at home, and I quite enjoy it. So that's why I'm quite interested in what you guys are doing. I noticed that you've gone from you have from receivers all the way to transceivers. Are you experiencing what pushback are you getting from the manned aviation world, or the aviation regulators, perhaps I should say?
Yeah. Well, I can say that, you know, from the pilot's perspective, we're not getting any pushback at all. You know, if pilots have bought into the benefits of electronic conspicuity, as they call it in the UK, right, making yourself electronically visible to others, appreciate that drones want to do the same thing. So no pushback there. In terms of the regulators, it varies greatly country by country. You know, I think everyone generally agrees that an electronic capability to be visible is important for drones, but what is the technology that should be used for drones? ADS-B is a technology that that we're bringing forward. In the U.S., there's concern, and I think it's a general concern worldwide, that if every drone out there were to broadcast ADS-B, what would that do to the available spectrum in the airspace, and would that have any negative implications on that? You know, so we're proposing some for that include low power solutions, that include conditional transmitting if there are a safety situation arises. In the UK, for example, they're very, very pro ADS-B drone for drones. So we've got some trials coming up with them, and they're very keen to have everyone in the airspace be visible to one another. So it really does vary. It really does.
There are sort of many solutions available out there, aren't there? So I guess this leads me neatly into saying, so is that why now I should have put that picture up? Is that why you are there we go, is it coming up? Is that why you're putting out receiver solutions as well? Will this allow people to create networks of ADS-B receivers to then feed a system to make them show up everywhere? So I mean, with the low power solutions, because perhaps they wouldn't be necessarily seen by other base stations. Is that the thinking behind that, or is this just a nice to have?
No, that is the thinking behind that, and you know, in the U.S. And other countries, the way they deployed an ADS-B system, they didn't necessarily think about low altitude drones or low power transmitters. So the spacing between the ground stations is such that you may have ADS-B coverage, but you might not have it until you're 1,000 feet up off the ground. So providing this kind of receiver technology that we can network together can enable an individual drone operator who next to his ground control station, or enable a city or a corridor or an airport to enhance their existing ADS-B coverage so that they can have visibility to the ground everywhere.
I guess right then. We've been playing with a similar thing here, just using Raspberry Pis and SDR stuff and all that sort of thing. A lot of people are doing that around the world. And it's quite interesting seeing just how many receivers you do need to get yourself coverage below 5,000 feet, for instance. And we've got an interesting problem here. I live above 5,000 feet, and a lot of the stuff is beneath me down by the coast. So, you know, it's very interesting. So for me to equip, well, I'm jumping around, but let's go with it anyway. What would it cost for me to equip, I don't know, say a Matrice or a Pixhawk equipped drone with one of your transceivers?
So we start at kind of the bottom with the receive-only solutions. And you know, that brings situational awareness. So the operator can see on their ground control station the other aircraft in the area. So when you held up the Pixhawk earlier, that's a device that we interface with natively, so you can plug right in to one of our receivers, and it feeds that down through your telemetry link. So getting that situational awareness, we think, is a great first step. That's the lowest lowest point of entry, and those are 125, I believe, US dollars. And they integrate, like I said, with Pixhawk, but they really can be interfaced with quite a few different things. They natively speak Mavlink, which is what quite a few platforms do use. We also work with the DJI platforms and integrate with their onboard SDK using those same devices. When you step up to the transmit, it varies a little bit country to country because different things, different frequencies are legal in different places. We're real actively trying to innovate and bring down the cost by offering lower power solutions that are more tailored for the unmanned market and for the distances that we really want to communicate. Currently, just as an example, in the US, what we have is a 20-watt solution, which is more than adequate. It's the same thing you would put in a manned aviation airplane. And it weighs 20 grams. There, Christian's holding it up. And that is basically a receiver and a transmitter, so it's a transceiver. And then it pairs with a GPS, high integrity GPS, so that you know with good certainty what your position is. The pair of those goes for current pricing on that.
What are we talking about? The
2020 GPS?
1700.
1700.
Yep. So it's these two pieces combined. It costs about $1,700.
Yeah, US dollars. And then we have a version of that that's integrated all in one box, which is fairly similar in pricing. So that's a GPS built in. So these right now, with these type of things, are definitely oriented at the commercial market. It's not going to be, the hobbyist with his Phantom flying around a park. But for operators that are needing to integrate into airspace, that need to operate near airports, that are operating in busy environments, that might even have insurance requirements for this, it makes a lot of sense. Our goal is to really be able to enable this ecosystem, to build it out to the point that we continue to drive that cost down, because we feel the more universal equipage that we have, the better solution it is for starters, but that of course the costs are going to come down. So we've got some really neat things that we feel if eventually deployed into mass markets and integrated into some of the OEM devices, that it almost becomes a safety device like a seatbelt or an airbag, something that's built in the cost of it and really enhances the safety for everyone.
Well, I could keep asking questions for ages. Shall I throw it out to the floor, gentlemen? Has anyone else got any questions for the chaps there? Bruce, you probably have, haven't you?
No, no questions from me. No, it looks like a good solution. And
I had a question regarding sorry, we're getting like, okay, you go, Bruce.
No, you go first, mate.
A question regarding the insurance. You mentioned that. Are you aware of, I guess, anything currently with the United States with the insurance policies where if you were to use one of your units, you would have a potentially like lower premium or higher limit of liability or something like that? Can you expand on that further?
There isn't any to my knowledge to date, but we are working closely with a couple of underwriters to try to influence such a program. So they've shown interest. They're doing a little bit of investigation into the regulations themselves, so that they know what they're getting themselves into. But they certainly operate on familiar models. If you do certain things, you get discounts. So it's not a foreign concept to them.
We've had a number of operators ask us specifically in context of that as they do try to get insurance, especially for urban operations. But I think it also ties into a larger question of how kind of flight departments are organized and how quality assurance of those flight departments up. So FOCAs and things like that often have insurance tie-ins with them, and will have certain requirements for what type of equipment you might have, as well as flight manuals and all of those type of things. So it's a big question. We don't have a specific insurance program, but we know it's part of the broader answer there.
My turn.
Okay.
Now, the you'd mentioned the issue of sort of flooding the ASD B space with too many craft, too many transponders. Have you considered making an alternative protocol for maybe even the hobbyist area? You know, like Flam have done it with gliders and small aircraft. Is there a provision in there to add your own unique protocol that will take it out of the ADS-B space for areas and operations when ADS-B visibility isn't a requirement?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's absolutely something that we've been focused very heavily on. And there's a fine line that we're really walking here between certainly what we're capable of and what our vision for things is. And our initial contention when we founded the company is that everyone benefits by seeing each other. That the more situational awareness everyone has, the better off people are. And it's a real problem in the manned aviation industry that the upgrade cycles are so long. So trying to push a new frequency into the cockpit so that airplanes could see drones is so difficult it's a near impossibility. In the other direction, it's not as bad. Drone operators are upgrading weekly, right? But it's certainly a problem that we do want pilots to be able to see drones, especially medevac pilots, agricultural pilots, low-level inspection, things like that. That being said, we understand that there's probably several capabilities that don't necessarily need the same technology and might have one that's a baseline that all pilots and airplanes could see, and an expanded set of capabilities that might provide additional information. And we're very heavily involved in those efforts, Christian specifically.
Yeah, so in the States, and I don't know how active this is internationally, but in the States, there's a new push for something they're calling remote identification. And the point of remote identification isn't necessarily for collision avoidance, but it's for accountability purposes and for law enforcement to understand who a drone flying overhead might belong to. And so in those conversations, essentially we've proposed that we could reprogram our technology with whatever the new protocol and new frequency would need to be in order to enable that scenario. So what we don't want to do is just I don't think we want to sort of invent something new and just try to have people adopt it from a commercial perspective. We really like to help influence the direction that regulations go and help push a technology that everyone can use.
We do want it to be standards based, right, for sure, and open, and something that both industry and regulators buy in on. But it also brings up another important point, and that's really the basis of our technology. So we spent a lot of time and money developing a central core of a digital radio that's really designed to be able to be flexible, work with different frequencies in different regions, but really attack this aviation radio problem in a way that no one has done before by really miniaturizing the technology, putting a lot of investment up front. What Christian's holding here is the actual chip that we developed. We call it the Ping digital radio, and that's what it's at the core of all of our products. And it weighs a fraction of a gram. It's a single chip, and it's really the difference between traditional avionics, what you have in your cockpit, really aren't any different than what you had in a bag phone 20 or 30 years ago. It's pretty outdated technology. We're trying to bring these avionics into the iPhone era with miniaturization, low power, high speed, and we're able to be very flexible with this digital radio, and we can enable some of these alternate protocols, frequencies, and things if there ends up being a good reason to do so. So our core technology and IP really revolves around that.
So you've got obviously FCC certification. What about from aviation authorities? Because as we know, if you want to put something in an aircraft, it costs 10 times as much because it's got to be certified. So have you built in the certification cost to this the 20-watt unit you're looking at there, in case the FAA say, well, everything that goes in a drone for commercial purposes has to be certified? And is that price inclusive of that overhead?
Great question, and it's one that's very relevant. We are currently in Washington, D.C., and we're having discussions with the FAA today on those very topics. So there's a couple of things. There's the question of what needs to be certified on an aircraft and what aircraft need to have certified components on them, and what is the method for certification. So lots of combinations of variables there. In the States, at least, if you have what's called a type certificated aircraft, then you need to have certified avionics on board. What's called a TSO here in the States is one means to certify an aircraft or certify a piece of equipment that goes on board a type certificated aircraft. Other methods are some supplemental type certificate or an STC. And we have a TSO for one of our products today, so we've got some experience going through that process. It's for our GPS, and this is it here. We've got a TSO GPS. We're not currently going through a TSO process for the transceiver for a couple of reasons. One is we're not sure if it's going to be required. We're trying to get a feel from the FAA as to whether or not they are going to require certified avionics on board. And if it is required, is a TSO going to be the methodology that is appropriate? To date, there aren't really any type certificated UAVs out there. They're sort of, I don't want to say they're one-offs because there are certainly production line aircraft out there, but they're not under what the FAA calls a type certificated program. So to date, the certification requirements are really coming from the end customers, whether it's the DoD, they may want to see some level of credibility associated with the avionics, or just a risk-conscious commercial provider that wants to have some sort of quality indicator of the technologies that they're putting on board. So it's still sort of TBD in terms of what levels of certification are going to be required, and we're active in that space, but we're not currently pursuing the TSO with the transceiver just yet. But you ask us again in 6 months, and we might be 3 months into it. So we iterate pretty quickly. Yeah.
And do the FAA guys that you're working with understand what you've got in your hands? Do they understand your product? Do they understand where you're going and what your vision is? Or are they willing to talk about it, or is it all new and a bit frightening for them?
It depends on who we're talking with. I mean, so one common saying here in the FAA or here in the States is that there are many FAAs, right? There's lots of stovepipes, and the different stovepipes tend to have their own perspectives and attitudes towards new technologies. The organization that is called the UAS Integration Office, who is in charge of integrating the drones into the airspace, are very progressive. They were one of the groups we met with today. I do believe that they get it. I do believe that they get the vision. The Pathfinder programs that you may or may not have heard about here in the States with BNSF Railroad and a company called Precision Hawk, both of those use ADS-B in their Pathfinder program, so they certainly understand what we have to offer. Communicating our vision is something that we have to do continually, so that people ultimately get it and buy into it. So that's again why we're here today.
It helps to hold the devices too. I mean, just showing up with the devices. The first time I saw one of our devices when I came on board, it was our receiver device, which also has some transmission capabilities, but very small. It weighs right around a gram with the plastics off, a couple grams with it on. Christian's about to hold that up. So this is like something that might interface with a Pixhawk as a receiver. And I'm a pilot, Christian's a pilot. We know how big avionics are. I know how big ADS-B receivers are. And I picked that up, and I couldn't stop giggling. It was so small and so light and so unlike anything else. That education process, a lot of it is just showing up with these things and people seeing them at trade shows and saying, this really is possible. Because first year at trade shows, people saying that can't possibly work. There's no way you made it that small. It can't be that power output. There's no way. And so I think we're making believers out of people both in the industry and regulatory. And the more product we get out there, and the more people successfully use it, the more research agreements we have, the more governments we work with, the more programs we participate in, and we are working with a lot the more credibility that we really have in the industry, certification or not.
It seems to me that you're ready to jump as to whatever technology solution might end up being, because let's face it, ADSB is actually quite an old solution now. Even though we're just talking about it now, it's been around for a few years, and radio technology has moved on a little bit. I would hazard a guess that that your radios are some sort of software-defined radio. Maybe not. You may not want to be drawn on that. But that sort of is the way things are going, and AeroVironment have just released a product that has a software-defined radio in it, which is great because it means you can move it around whatever frequency, whatever your local regulator requires. You can make your aircraft move without having to change this module, that module, and do the other. So that's a very clever way of going. And I'm ranting on a little bit again. So fair play to you. I'm very impressed. I'm very impressed by everything seen. I'm struggling not to be an advocate for your product because I shouldn't be. I should be unbiased. But it seems just the ticket. I don't know, Bruce. Can you calm me down a little bit?
No, mate. It's a good product at the right timing. It could do well in the market because this is a solution that everyone's waiting for. It's going to basically give some authentication to the use of unmanned aerial vehicles beyond visual line of sight and in controlled airspace.
Here in South Africa, we're getting space-based ADSB, and that's due to start rolling out next year. And I think it's one point where the unmanned aircraft can be ahead of the game quite easily. They can be ahead of the manned community here, and it is, come on guys, catch up. What's taking you so long? And I think that's going to be very interesting. But anyway, I suppose, look, we've had just about half the program already, which is, I could talk about this ADSB all night. We better move on a little bit. And some of the things that caught my eye this week, the first thing, there's Gene throwing an airplane. And we should say hi, Kevin, as well. One of the things, first thing that caught my eye was that the Drone Racing League have signed on with the Amazon Grand Tour, the ex-Top Gear guys. And Chris Ballard, you were at an event last week and you signed an NDA. Do you fancy breaking that NDA now?
I feel comfortable in saying that it was a very interesting and very educational event to attend. But beyond that, I'm not sure that I have the lawyers present to divulge any further.
Oh, come on! You surely you're not afraid of a little old Amazon, are you? Come on, man! What can they do to you?
I did think it was a very interesting thing to attend. That there were a number of areas in which I found very educational, especially for our company, as did a number of other high-end business people, which I met with directly after the event. There were a number of discussions there, but again, can't go into too much detail other than saying that it was an enjoyable night. Very good company. Some great drone guys were there, and there were some great pilots racing on the night.
And that was the event in Alexandra Palace last weekend, I think, wasn't it? Oh, a week before.
Ali Pali is the local spot, yes.
Been there many times. I love that place. It's a great place. And you're on your own Grand Tour, which I thought was amazing of them to announce that they were...
The Drone Racing Grand Tour.
The Drone Racing Grand Tour. I thought it was very decent of them to attend your event.
Yes.
And how's that going? Where have you been already? You've been to Korea,
I started the adventure in South Korea, in Seoul, and we went to the Janggung Drone Park where they had the FAI Drone Racing World Cup. There was about 120 pilots present, and I have to say the KAMA, or the Korean Aeronautical Association, did a fantastic job. They were pushing pilots through. It was just bang, 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 bang. Every 30 seconds there was another race happening. That was all the gap in between races. They were really a phenomenal bunch. They had absolutely everything down to a T, really organised. It was really a great event for the pilots. It was quite a good event all around. I was quite happy with it. The only problem is that those guys party a little bit too hard for me. I'm getting too old for that kind of thing now. So yeah, it was a very, very good time though. So we're starting to put out some of our media around the event at the moment. We've got a fair bit of a backlog that's due for release. So make sure you log on to our YouTube channel, Freedom Drone Sports. And stay tuned to the Drone Racing Grand Tour as it starts to move forward. As you said, at the moment I'm in the UK. I just went to the Western Park event. I did try to do some live streaming at the event, but unfortunately there was no reception whatsoever for anybody at all, which was very disappointing. So it made live stream very difficult. Yeah, it's been an interesting adventure.
And so you're being, obviously, it sounds like you're being watered, all right? Are you being fed, all right? Because that was one of your concerns.
Yes, I've been eating microwave rice, and I even had some carrots and hummus the other day. So I'm looking after myself very, very well.
And then where are you off to next? Where's the next stop of your world tour?
So this weekend I'm heading off to Germany. I'm going to go to Nördling for any of you motorsports fans out there. There's a drone race out that way, which is apparently going to be very popular with about 150, 200 pilots attending. So it's going to be quite a large event. It's not an FAI sanctioned event, but it'll certainly be something interesting to watch. So I'll be attempting to do a live stream there, but rest assured I'll be doing a lot of interviews with a lot of pilots and people spectating, getting a feel of the community there, and really trying to portray the story that's going on behind the scenes.
And when we wind it all back to your Freedom class machines, your 150 kilo machines, they're probably going to need ADSB if they go off track.
30 kilo machines.
30. I was at 30. Jumping ahead there. But they're still big enough. They won't even notice it, will they?
Well, there's certainly some interesting things there that we'll pay to look into. Certainly, yes.
Okay, good. All right. And the next thing that caught my eye, that was the did anyone else see today that professional? I should have had this. The guys in Canada got hit by a rock. Someone threw a rock at their machine off a tall building as it was getting airborne. It was quite a fancy. They were making an advert, and this quite fancy thing was knocked out of the sky by a rock chucked from above. Anyone else see that?
Yeah, I saw that.
You saw that. Well, you've got laws against chucking rocks out of building. Oh, it's Canada. There's probably no laws in Canada, is there?
Yeah, I think there are. If lucky they didn't throw a small animal at the drone, or the drone operators could have been really badly fined.
Yes. I thought that's interesting. They might come on next week, so we'll see that. I'm going to stop talking in a minute. And then, no, I really have got to share this picture. I've really got to share this picture. If I can find this picture. Where's this picture? Hang on. What I'm rushing about trying to look for now is that the never unmanned quad thing, which with multiple engines. That's all going awfully well, isn't it? Oh dear me. Let's see. Is that sharing? Is that working now? Did we all? No, it's not, is it? Blast. Did we all see that crazy thing? That was a quad with about 32 engines and launched at the Paris Air Show. A man's jobby.
Oh, you mean the Airbus?
Was it a bit like the Volocopter that we used to see around the place?
No, it's another one. Oh, I can't believe. Now I've got to draw a picture, haven't I? Can't believe I can't get a picture of it. But it's absolutely nussy. Turbines and everything and all that sort of thing. But anyway, I'll stop talking. I made a complete hash of all that. Bruce, but that's interesting. Bruce has stopped in one picture and he's walked off in another. How's he do that?
Hey, nice.
How's he do that?
Magic. I tell you, look, there's too many me around.
Today on the Bruce and Bruce show.
Yeah. So, Bruce. Bruce, have you seen anything recently?
Which Bruce are you asking? Yeah. No. I see drones have got some positive coverage. Finally, we saw some missing hikers located by drone, and also defibrillators being delivered by drone, which has got to be good. And I saw that in Dubai, they're going to be using a drone taxi service, which again calls into the question of the word drone. Does drone mean unmanned? Because if you have a drone taxi, then it's going to be empty, isn't it? So yeah, there's a lot of things happening in the drone area, which are sort of catching my eye. But we're still fighting the media. I see Fox News did another story saying that a medical helicopter almost collided with a drone. But when you read the story, it says that the pilot of the helicopter saw a drone. So the headline doesn't match the story again. I don't know. I really sort of get frustrated. I'm about to fill out the survey here for CAA. They've got a survey I mentioned last time inviting people to have their say about the New Zealand regulations. So I'll be having my say, and I hope lots of other people will. It's open to anyone, anywhere in the world. You don't have to be a drone operator. You don't have to be a New Zealander. You can go and fill out the form and have your say. So I'm thinking there's probably going to be a lot of old ladies who will be saying, ban them, ban them. So we have to have a weight of numbers to counter that perspective, and probably people will throw rocks at them as well.
Well, I filled that out last week, that thing, and I thought it was very, very biased towards the regulators. The questions were not necessarily impartial or fair. I thought they were leading you down the garden path.
Yeah, it is very loaded, but remember, this is the regulator that tried to have us believe that a Phantom 3 put a huge, great dent in the duct of a helicopter. So, and also lied about the number of incident figures. They're not particularly trustworthy. One thing I'm going to be doing is a video today inviting people to include in the survey form that they would like me to be on the board that is consulted for regulatory revisions and changes, because I'd like to keep them honest.
Well, funny enough, I did that already, and do you know, I'll tell you what I did. I took your top newspaper over there, I've forgotten the name of it, and it's subscribers numbers, and I said, okay, if you put a one-page ad in whatever it was, it had X number of subscribers, and for some obscure reason, this guy's got 200,000 subscribers on YouTube. There's no accounting for taste. Obviously, I had to put that sort of little rider in there for them. But yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, that's the sort of thing they've got to pay attention to. And I think they have got 32 subscribers on their YouTube channel, something like that. Again, I can't remember the numbers, but I looked at that before. So yeah, well, good luck to you. I hope that I hope that works out for you.
Yeah, and I have to get one of those little ADSB receivers to review, I think, for all the Pixhawk users out there.
Yeah, no, it's a cool thing. And that's just displayed straight on, back to uAvionix guys. That's just straight on Mission Planner as normal, I assume, via the Mavlink is how it appears.
That's right. Yep. Yeah. So there's accepted Mavlink messages that can both configure and communicate if you hook up a transceiver to it, but also passes that ADSB traffic information down to your Mission Planner, and it renders them a lot like you might see on a traditional aviation application. You see the airplanes flying around.
Yeah, I actually did a video about that a couple of weeks ago. It's so stupidly simple that it is stupidly simple, and it just works, which is fantastic. We haven't said hello to Kevin. Kevin, are you actually there? I see you muted over there.
I'm here. Yes. I'm here. I'm trying to get my headphones charged up, ready for this. How's everyone doing? You know what? I've been paying a lot of attention to the Paris Air Show, seeing what people were showing out there, and a lot of the news coming out from the Mideast on engagements. U.S. forces have shot down 2 129s, and that's the first time that U.S. Armed Forces have engaged and taken down enemy drones. You know, that's some interesting news out there. It's kind of interesting. I'd love to know what kind of armament they used and at what distance and things like that. A lot of information going on right now for the U.S. commercial industry, and where things are failing, especially when it comes to not having a voice of the actual operators and services out there, and you know, still being driven by manufacturers, need not be named, and really where that can happen. So that's kind of what's been going on over here.
I must admit, I am quite frightened of the phrase UTM. I keep saying it on this, and I know you avionics guys are inside all the UTMs, but I am very worried that it's going to turn into pay to play. And it did come into my ear when you used the word open for the standard. that gave me a little bit of hope that you guys are the guys that are running the current radio gear that might make a difference. Can also include the word open in your thinking. So well done, you. I did take note of that.
Yeah, I mean, we're definitely involved with a lot of the UTM activities. You know, it's one path forward, but you know, the timetables are not the type of timetables we like to look at from an industry perspective. So, you know, it's absolutely important work that's going on. I hope, like you, that it doesn't become pay to play, and that it's an open system that we can all participate in. That's really how things have been, both in the technology industry that have been successful, and really with aviation technologies.
And do you guys think you might have some good ideas for where avionics might go in the future that might make all this a little bit easier? Do we have to stay with this standard of 10, 12 years old, whatever it is?
Well, it's, Ryan alluded to the, the cost of avionics installation into manned aircraft is really a significant driver in the, the age of technologies and how long they persist, right? So if you think of an aircraft, a Cessna 172, might have a life of 35 years or more. A drone might have a life of 5, right? So you'll see a lot of iteration and improvement in whether you call them avionics or electronics or just the technology that goes into drones will iterate much more quickly than it still will within general aviation or aviation at large. But you should at some point start to see how some of those innovations make their way from the drone space into the cockpit. Whether they're certified or not, you still might be able to take advantage of small radars or other communications devices that other types of things that we can't even imagine that are being developed for drones today, how they might benefit in the manned aviation space. So it's a little bit to be seen, but we sort of predict that going to drive innovation across all of aviation.
And we feel and we see that at shows that when we go, especially to the manned aviation shows, and we talk about why drones are good, and I know we've had some blog entries about this as well on why drones might save general aviation, why they might save manned aviation. There's a clear and direct correlation both for excitement in aviation overall and for the technology that we're providing. And if you look back over the last 60 years of advancements of what has gone into manned aviation, there have been a couple big shifts as they went from tubes to digital radios, and recently with getting iPads in the cockpits, but it hasn't really been integrated in a way that makes it really high tech. I mean, there's still a lot of isolation of these systems. And like Christian said, we can make a clear proposition that the airplane of 10 years from now looks radically different because of how we're pushing and how other companies are pushing to bring these cell phone technologies that have made their way into drones and these drone technologies that will make their way into manned aircraft. And pilots eat it up. They really buy it. And back to one of your original questions was, how do pilots feel about this? They love it because they see that we're going to bring down the cost of a lot of these technologies for them, and we're going to bring them new things. So we always have to keep a perspective on the past, have compatibility with a lot of these older technologies. Transponders date back to World War II, essentially. I mean, these are not new technologies that they've had to maintain compatibility with, but we think there can be an increased pace of adoption, absolutely, above what we've seen. And ADS-B, that's a 90s technology at best. So it's not the latest and greatest, but it's the latest and greatest that we have in an airplane today.
Yeah,
I have a question, guys. Oh, go ahead, guys.
No, after you.
So if I was a manned pilot and I wanted to see all the drones that were in your system, do you have that ability right now where I can have that on my iPad and see all active users?
Yeah. So are you? If you're a pilot now, then you're familiar probably with a product called the Aperio Stratus ADS-B receiver, which pairs with a number. Stratus pairs with a product called ForeFlight Mobile, but there are other ADS-B receivers that pair with different electronic flight bag applications, and they will display traffic to you in the cockpit on your mobile device, your phone, your iPad, your Android device, etc. We've got similar products, and so I'll hold up an example of a product that is in development right now. This is a small ADS-B receiver. It's got a Wi-Fi output. You pair it with your phone. You can see all of the aircraft in your area that are transmitting ADS-B devices. So yes, and we're tackling it from not only from the transmitting device perspective, but from the receiver perspective, so that you can see it with an installed network, or you can see it from portable devices like this, or you can see it on your drone itself through Mission Planner.
Oh, that's great. And compared to like the $1,000 Apparel product, what would that unit run? The one that
About $200. About $200.
Excellent.
Yeah.
And if you want to make your own, you can make yourself a Stratux with a Raspberry Pi. Oh no, the camera's over here. With a Raspberry Pi and a 3D printed thing, and that'll set you back less than 100. If you care, Kevin, to look at our YouTube channel, you'll see I made a video about that. But it's yeah, no, it is stunning. But obviously, sorry, you guys, you've got very tidy products, not gash-made things from my desk.
This comes in a box, Gary. There's comes in a box with some documentation. There's a little different.
Yeah,
and we do sell product into the Stratux space. We make a radio that pairs with Stratux and replaces the software-defined radios, and it's a single USB port you plug into it, and it's much lower power, so it doesn't eat through your batteries and melt your fingers when you touch it quite as badly, and the range is generally better both close and far away. So we're fully on board with that. We talked about the openness. That's something that's been very important to us, and we wanted to support that community with some other options. So all for Stratux, and we have support for our radios integrated in the mainline build. So if you go download Stratux, you can go on Amazon and purchase what we call a Ping EFB, and it hooks right in there. So we think that's a very cool project. And like you said before, there's a lot of Raspberry Pi receivers based on that same type of thing to crowdsource data. The question a moment ago about can you go look somewhere and just see everyone using our system? A central cloud site right now that'll do that. Most of what we do is local receivers or private receivers that people have bought. But there are people out there feeding data from our receivers into some of these larger public networks like Flight Radar 24 or FlightAware. And we sell receivers that do that. For drone-specific applications, there's companies that are working on kind of aggregating that traffic. One company that we work with is called AirMap. They make applications and also work to aggregate mapping, flight restrictions, traffic. So there's certainly a number of different aspects to tackling that problem, whether you want the information locally or sourced over the internet. The advantage of doing it locally is you need to have it be very real time to have the assurance to use it for collision avoidance. And that becomes a little more difficult proposition over the internet.
Yeah, absolutely. We do just that here, and it's very interesting. And then feed about 10 receivers into Mission Planner via URL. And Robert's your father's brother. There you go. Wide area. And as you say, if you see the traffic coming from further away, then you've got more of a chance to do something about it. And it's amazing how simple it is. I didn't mean to knock you guys when I said you can make that. I'm sorry. What surprises me in a childlike way is just how simple it is to do these things these days. It is. You download an image, you put it on, you plug a thing in, and it works, which is that doesn't happen with technology. So it's just fantastic. So there's no excuse for it not to happen. And I can think that regulators had no idea when they started rolling this out that it was 400 ground stations in the US that cost X million each, and this and that. You need communication links, whatever. You could get a load of high schools to beat that coverage. Some kids will knock that together in a weekend if you promise beer or something like that. But when ADS-B was brought into Alaska, I think it made quite a chunk of safety difference, didn't it? Didn't it improve safety by 30% or something like that when the first trial happened? So it is a bit of a win-win, really.
Yeah, and part of my history is with the company that deployed the system in the U.S. Part of my past career, and unfortunately, the Alaska deployment preceded my employment with that company. But it was called the Capstone program back then, when they deployed, the first system out there for pilots. And Alaska is a very general aviation based territory, because it's so vast and so wild, and there are many towns that you can only get to through by flying. So bush pilots, etc. There were lots of losses from an aircraft goes down and they've got no record of where it went down. So there was lots of improvements from not only see and avoid, sense and avoid capabilities, but from search and rescue perspectives as well. And weather. Yeah, of course. You guys are lucky. You've got the weather on 978, but that doesn't seem to be going very far with everyone else. Gene, you've been flashing away at us. Is there anything that's caught your eye this week?
Well, actually, I was just amusing myself by putting pictures up and just kind of terabytes of images, and thought I'd throw a few history lessons up there. But no, one of the things that, again, I'm going to say it strikes me that you hear more and more stories out of China. There was they had a hail bird that they launched and stayed up for 6 days or some such like that. And one of the things that strikes me is that China has very, very heavily invested in the drone technology. They're going to be pushing the leading edge on this.
Well, they're just a number of unit years ahead now, aren't they? I don't know what that number is, but they're not months, they're not days ahead, they're years ahead in some regards.
Yeah, but I think you're right, and that's unfortunate. Oh, by the way, I did hear that I don't believe that the F-15 is equipped with a gun of any type. It had to have been a Sidewinder or a heat seeker to bring that Shahed drone down.
Yeah, that's correct. It had to have been a missile fired from, 30-mile standoff. They just never released those information. I wish I knew what it was specifically, only just to do a comparison.
Little history, one of those pictures that I flashed up there was the Super Bat. Super Bat's 8-foot wingspan, and they took it out somewhere in California, and the Marines had to go at it with a couple of F-15s, and it took them about 3 or 4 passes before they finally hit the thing. So
yeah, that's correct. It's a 60. I believe it's a 48 to 60% miss rate on profiles like that size.
It's moving so slow, and it just doesn't have a very big signature. And it took them a while to knock it down. I thought that was kind of amusing. I can tell you, I can relate a story that I went on a search one time, and I was out off the active end of Fort Hood in Texas during a presidential TFR, surprisingly enough, doing a search. Called them up and told them I was going to be flying, and they said, "Okay, great. We're gonna paint that into the runway so we can watch you fly." Yeah, in a little while. So for about 20 minutes, landed, and I called him back up, and the guy answered the phone. He says, "Okay, we're ready." He said,
in Farnborough,
all I heard was an explanation.
in Farnborough in 2010, we flew, and I can't remember which camera company, military hardware, said no, and we're going to film you from the. You'll never escape our eyes. We're going to film you from the other side and put you on the big screen. And they never saw us once. The whole crowd, 75,000 people, standing by, and they didn't. It was very, very, very impressive. I was led to believe. Yes, they say lost this guy. Jonathan, we've left you as well out in the cold, apart from earlier a little bit. Are you still there?
Yeah, I'm here.
you've been lining up all the regulations everywhere in the world, which is what in America you call a World Series, isn't it? It's something which only pertains to you, but you add the word world.
Something like that.
And how's that going for you at the moment?
It is very interesting. So for like states, the 50 states, they're all over the place. They use different terminology. Like for instance, Hawaii uses the term model craft, and everyone else uses all sorts of, drone, unmanned aircraft, unmanned aerial vehicles, blah, blah, blah. And so I compiled those all together and put them on the website. When you leave the United States and actually look for the other countries, it gets a little bit more dicey. I don't know if I'm going to put together a database for that yet, but the 50 states, that kept me very, very busy, and especially they're coming out with more and more laws constantly. I mean, like Texas just came out with a law. Colorado, is it Michigan? Came out a little while ago. Florida has a law that just passed that is, well, it hasn't been signed by the governor yet, but it's still waiting for him. So this stuff's happening all over the place. And then in addition to that, we had the Drone Innovation Act, which was passed, well, not passed, but introduced as of the June 16th by Representative Jason Lewis in the House, which is kind of like a similar bill, similar to Senator Feinstein's bill that many people had talked about.
And UAV innovation, what does that mean? What's going to happen? And is it called the UAV innovation? That's already wrong.
Well, it's a drone unit. It's the Drone Innovation Act of 2017, and it has a bunch of interesting provisions in it. It's better than the Senator Feinstein Drone Federalism Act that was put out. I put out a summary last night of it, and it's basically trying to answer the question of what the states, local and tribal governments can do in regards to regulating unmanned aircraft lower to the ground, about specifically 200 feet AGL and below. So it's better than Feinstein's, which allowed for the local restrictions to actually kind of go 200-foot lateral. Well, this is primarily just directly above, is from what I read. So,
well, hats off to you for having a go at putting all this in one place. Where's it all going to lead in the end, though? How is a commercial operator that can ply his trade across America, possibly, other than going to your website, of course, Jonathan, but other than doing that, how is he going to find out all this information? And why isn't there a standard? Why isn't everybody using aviation terminology at very least?
People like to play FAA. Right?
Okay.
I mean, go to Facebook and look at all the self-proclaimed pilot experts out there. I mean, it's done. Any other questions? I mean, it's like, that's pretty much what happened. And then so someone wants to play FAA, and they're just kind of talking and they don't really know what they're talking about. I actually listened in one time to a hearing on a specific town. I'm not going to mention their name, but they were discussing their aviation ordinance, which was so broad it actually banned all manned and unmanned aircraft below 1,000 feet. Now, whether that's legal or not, it's a whole nother discussion. But in the whole discussion with their talking about the drones, some individual who I have no clue what his background was basically discussing, 55-pound drones that could be flying up and down the beach directly over people at 100 miles an hour, and we need to stop that. And I was like, does anybody know any 55-pound drones that fly up and down the beach at 100 miles an hour? Because everybody with a really heavy aircraft tends to fly it very safely, because, for every so many pounds costs, how many tens of thousands of dollars. So those guys are probably the safest, as opposed to Mr. Phantom Boy over there operating out of the back of his, Camry or Cord, living at his parents' house in the basement, operating some fly-by-night type of drone. Anyways, so yeah, that's what's kind of going on all over the place. Some states have wisely put in preemptive language. Virginia and Florida. The bill that is before the governor right now.
Orlando?
Say again?
Orlando. Is that the one that you were mentioning there?
No.
With all preemptive language in there?
No. I would listen to the Orlando briefing, but no, this is another one. But at the state level, they have a preemption language in the bill that was passed by the House and Senate. It's waiting for signature by the governor. That would put an end to some of this nonsense, and hopefully more states kind of catch on to this, because the FAA hasn't really jumped into this area to try to defend it, and it's just kind of the droners are left out to fend for themselves. So more states need to pass that type of law preempting the local governments, counties, cities, towns from creating drone laws. So that way we only know to look at one place, and that's at the state level. We don't have to deal with Pamela down at the clerk's office down hall, right? Pamela. Who's Pamela? I don't know, but you're gonna have to find Pamela, and she's gonna be in some room, some down there, and she's gonna have to check out your insurance from wherever, right? And they're not gonna accept your Verify. They're gonna have to have some traditional, piece of paper, from the insurance company, and you're gonna have to have your 107, your registration. You're gonna have to do this all 30 days before you're actually going on a fly. And what is that? That's bad for business. All these regulations are doing primarily is just hurting the businesses when they want to come in. So either they're well-intending in trying to prevent some of this stuff, but sometimes they see it as a revenue generator. So then they kind of go one step further, and you need to go talk to Pamela and get our $50 local drone license or something. And they might start it innocuously, huh?
You just touched on it right there. The local municipalities, and I highlighted Orlando in an article I wrote, but it's also a money situation. If they can generate the revenue from it, that's what they want to do. But I completely agree with the whole statewide preemption language and putting a cut to it. I represent and lead probably the nation's largest commercial UAS company, and we have operations in 36 offices across the United States, and that's something that we have people researching and reviewing weekly, because there's always a new ordinance, there's always some local update, and as you said, Pamela is the one who's in charge of this, and you have to find out what's going on, and it really is problematic. But the other option of that, or the other side of that, is the people who completely flat out ignore it. And you said John Boy with his Phantom out there, that's another issue altogether. So it is a big issue, and I'm happy that you're trying to do some tracking and put something together for other people to use.
I know that John Boy was a journalist, but I can't believe he would be very bad with his Phantom. He was a good chap when the old John Boy. But anyway, the Pamela thing, it sort of rings true here as well. I've seen, funny enough, I was an American 747 guy stood next to me once in a flight crew licensing place in Kenya, and I noticed he had 14,000 hours in his logbook, and I was hugely impressed. And he shouted a lot at the Pamela that was behind the desk, and she took his paperwork from the top of the pile, moved the pile out the way, put it on the bottom of the desk, and then lifted the rest of the paperwork straight on top of this. So that was great. And my student in the Pamela there, she used to like pot plants. If you took a pot plant there, then you're A for away every time you went to the office. So that is perhaps the trouble with local regulations. I can't believe the FAA don't want a hat in the ring in stopping this, though, Jonathan, because if Pamela gets her foot in the door with drones and being able to do a few things like that, surely Pamela's going to have a pop at other things she doesn't like that flies.
Oh yeah. See, I think the manned aircraft guys need to realize that. I mean, what happened in October of 2015, where the drone registration arc and all of that, and everyone's quick to jump in and regulate drones. Well, it might be really interesting to find out that the drones are really the canary in the coal mine on a lot of issues, and so what happens to them will potentially eventually happen to some other people. So, for instance, the president of HAI wisely pointed out just recently here that they concerned about what's happening with this proliferation of the drone laws, that it can easily spill over onto helicopters, which have a very similar mission kind of profile, right? You're taking off in general in this kind of not the widest area as as a helicopter can fly, but you're kind of generally in that same vicinity, and you probably might not even leave counties. And so they see, an opportunity to potentially go in and actually regulate those guys, get Pamela to charge them maybe $500. That's a way better generator right there. And then, hey, why we're after the ag sprayers, let's go after all of those guys. The hell of that. Why don't we start focusing on them? So when everybody was beating up on the beginning, it's like you could potentially have got a snowball rolling that was then turn around. It was like an Indiana Jones or something like that. So everyone needs to be very, careful, especially as people are to fight in UTM. So depending, whichever way you fall on that, who's pushing it, what their agenda, why, or whatever, you have a lot of, certain in the aircraft community that are very against it, other groups that are very for it. And I find it very interesting that some of those groups were all picking on operational guys, and it's kind of interesting now. The drone guys, they would potentially beneficial to have a lot in your corner. That if you were going to fight privatization of AEC, you could do that, but you alienated yourself. And more benefits to the probably get that more done, I would say, in a privatization concept the FAA is currently doing. So bridges you bring about, might need people help you try to influence their elected officials. So I just find it very interesting, this political climate that shifted from 2015 to 2017.
Yeah, I think Pamela is going to be deeply in all of our lives very, very, very soon, from many angles, and it's worrying. And she's not a local girl either.
The thing about Texas, the Texas law that Johnny was talking about, is that they have taken away the municipalities' rights to govern their airspace. The state law that just was recently passed. A city like Austin, who would very much like to control drones in the parks and over people and down 6th Street, they're not going to be able to do that. They can only fly, or they can only govern the drones that fly over city infrastructure. So that was a little bit of an interesting twist.
Yeah, no, for sure. Look, we've run over time, and I haven't still got a gavel yet to hit down. But before we go, does anyone else have anything else?
Yeah, Chris, when is the Grand Tour of Drones coming to visit Team Nana?
Probably on my way back, which is going to be around the end of November, I dare say, which is when we're going to be finishing up. I anticipate that's going to be ending in Spain mid-November. So it's going to be a bit of a journey ahead of us.
Cool. We'll roll out the welcome mat, mate.
Look forward to it.
Many, many, many youth hostels are in your life, young Mr. Ballard.
Oh, you don't know the half of it.
Yeah, I'm sure there's things I don't want to know. All right, well, with that then, I need to thank very much Christian and Ryan from uAvionix. Thank you very much for taking the time to join us and for allowing us to bend your ear. I love what you're doing, and it's definitely part of the future, not the past. So I look forward to watching that going from strength to strength. And to everyone else, to Chris, Bruce, Gene, Jonathan, and then Kevin, thanks very much. Hopefully you can join us again next week. Like, subscribe, do all those things. As Bruce says, don't like even, because that's just the same net output. And hopefully we'll see you again at 2100 next Tuesday. Same bat channel. Oh, same bat channel. Poor old Adam West, he's gone on now, hasn't he? And with that, I'll say good night. Cheers all.
Thank you.